Good morning, guys, and welcome back to a brand new episode of So Cultured Debunked, or shall I say good afternoon, good evening, who knows what time zone you guys are in. I mean, we can always say good morning or good evening because it's always my morning or Taz's evening or vice versa because as you guys know, or if you don't know, Taz lives in Australia, I live in the UK, so we are always filming at like the most unhinged times. Like it's either super early for one of us or super late for the other one. Like right now it is 20 to 12 for me and it's 20 to 11 for you in the evening.
Yeah, in the evening. Like I'm 11 hours ahead, so it's actually crazy.
Yeah. So I'm kind of branching into the afternoon, but we was also just talking about like when we've been filming for a long time and we're obviously sat here, we've got like these ring lights in our face. After a few hours of filming, your eyes just start to go a bit crazy. My eyes could just be darting all over in this episode.
Yeah, by the time I finish this, it's going to be pretty late. So it's like, it's just crazy. Like some of the things we do for this podcast, I'm telling you guys, it is hard.
The commitment is real.
But I guess it's my fault for literally moving across the other side of the world. Like literally, I couldn't be further from the UK, globally wise and distance wise. And that brings us nicely on to today's episode because we are talking all about the flat earth theory. So let's get into it. This is Debunked by the So Cultured Podcast,
hosted by Liv and Taz, two girls exploring the world of science and tech, unfiltered.
This season, we're separating fact from fiction as we dive into the world's most controversial conspiracy theories by seeing if science can prove or disprove them.
And of course, we are still serving up the laboratory
because the STEM world is messier than you think.
Don't forget, all opinions are our own, and all of our listener stories are alleged. Let's get into this week's episode of Debunked.
Alright, so for centuries, humanity has looked up at the stars, navigated vast oceans, and sent explorers beyond the limits of our world into space. And yet, some still claim that we've been deceived, that the Earth isn't a spinning sphere hurtling through space, but instead flat. A grand illusion, a conspiracy stretching back generations. But how did this idea survive in the face of overwhelming scientific evidence? And is the evidence for a flat Earth that convincing? And could there actually be some truth to it?
I think it's safe to say that this is one of the most controversial and extreme conspiracy theories. And to be honest, I don't know much about this theory. And like I know of it, but I don't actually know like what the flat earthers actually believe and if they all agree on like a set of principles in this theory.
Yeah, I've got to say this was probably one of the harder conspiracy theories that I've had to research because it's so hard, especially as a scientist, to see a flat earth side. But the modern flat earth movement can be broken down into 4 separate theories that like kind of overlap, and some people agree with, some people don't. But the first is like the most fundamental one, which is that the earth is flat and Antarctica is a giant ice wall that holds all of the contents inside the sky, and above the earth is a dome similar to like a planetarium, and the sun and the moon rotate on an axis around the top of the dome, giving us the simulation of day and night. And the second theory is that NASA is covering up the truth about the nature of the Earth in order to use the US's tax money not on space research, but on top secret projects. Now, what those top secret projects are, no idea, and it's not told what they are, I guess, because they're top secret. And then the third is one you've probably heard before, that the Earth is not just another planet, but it sits at the center of our solar system and was created by something much, much bigger than humans. And the Big Bang, well, it never happened, which is giving like Bible theories for things, you know. And the fourth is that gravity, as we know it, doesn't exist. And instead, the Earth is just constantly moving upward, being pushed by dark energy that provides this acceleration and causes the sensation that we refer to as gravity. So like the flat Earth that we're on is moving upwards. And as a result, it's causing us to be able to stand on Earth, if that makes sense.
Okay, so they're really just coming up with anything but gravity. Like they'll accept anything but gravity.
Pretty much.
Okay. The reason I laughed when you said about the Antarctic and like the walls, I literally was holding in my laugh because you remember at the start of this series, I told you about my uncle who's like doolally and he believes any conspiracy theory. And at Christmas dinner, he started trying to tell me that evolution was a lie and it was like this whole thing. But I specifically remember like being a kid and he was so flat earth, like he is a flat earther, and he really well and truly believed that in the Antarctica there are mile-high walls that are protecting like top secret NASA military projects. And it just made me laugh. But there's quite a few like explanations, I guess, like you've just said before. But where did this theory actually first ever originate from? But how did people even come up with this?
Yeah. Okay, so let's go back to the summer of 1838. And this is a time where significant scientific discoveries are being made. So the atom has just been discovered, for an example, and the Doppler effect is being investigated or unraveled. And amid these advancements, there's a man called Samuel Rowbotham who went by the pseudonym Parallax. Like he just gave himself a new nickname. Not too sure why, but I decided to add that detail in for fun.
Wait, like he called himself Parallax?
Yeah. Like he published a few books and that was like his name on the book.
First, I guess it's like having a stage name or something.
Yeah, but he basically decided to revisit a long settled debate. So it was kind of already established at this point that the Earth was round, and I'll go into how we got to that conclusion a bit more into the episode. But basically, his reason for that was that science was advancing so quickly that it was not necessarily observable by the standard human being who wasn't in science. And so there was this gap in like what people could observe themselves and what discoveries scientists were making. So basically it was becoming more unbelievable for the average person compared to previously when a lot of science was observable discoveries. So he wanted to revisit the shape of the earth, and he actually spent his childhood poring over the Bible as much as his textbooks. I feel like this is quite a common theme with flat earthers as well. But as Rowbotham grew older and his academic studies advanced, he was suddenly confronted with really frustrating contradictions. So Newtonian science doesn't really reconcile well with the teachings of the Bible. So in Genesis, it spoke of the earth's four corners with the heavens above the earth. So that would mean that the earth couldn't be a globe though, could it? So to test this theory, Rowbotham believed he could demonstrate that the earth was flat through direct observations, and he chose a nearly 10-kilometre or 6-mile canal in Cambridgeshire as the site for his experiment. And his reasoning was straightforward. If the earth was a globe with a circumference of 25,000 miles, its curvature should cause objects to gradually disappear from view as they moved further away. Specifically, after 1 mile, the surface should drop by approximately 8 inches, and after 2 miles by 32 inches, and after 3 miles by 6 feet. And that was a pattern that should continue over great distances. So to test this, Rowbotham placed a telescope just above the water surface and observed a boat with a 1 meter tall post with a flag at the top as it travelled along the canal. And according to his calculations, the post should have gradually disappeared beyond the horizon due to the curvature of the earth. However, he reported that the post remained visible for the entire 6-mile distance, proving that the earth was flat. And so Rowbotham published his findings and continued to advocate for his flat earth theory. And on December the 5th, 1849, Rowbotham even scheduled a lecture at the Working Men's Newsroom in Blackburn. But things didn't go quite as planned during the lecture because some attendees wanted to know why the hulls of ships that travelled out to the sea disappeared before their masts. So like the base of the ship, as it went over, it disappeared before the top of the mast. And so that kind of goes against everything that Rowbotham has kind of said or discovered. And he became flustered, and instead of defending his position, he announced the answers would be revealed during his next lecture, which was 2 days away.
Sorry, how convenient. I wish I could do that. Like someone asked me a question I don't know. Sorry, actually I'm addressing that in my next lecture. Like if you could just come along to that, but I can't answer it right now. don't want to spoil it for you.
Well, exactly. I mean, and that was his plans, right? Because at his next lecture, everyone turned up to finally get those answers. And do you know what? He didn't show up.
Imagine that. That's funny.
Well, it's funny you say that because a lot of people had that opinion at the time, and a lot of people were like, well, he obviously didn't have an answer for it. But despite this, the lecture was only a minor setback because with more experience, his wits sharpened and he learned how to experience these doubters. And as his skills grew, so did his following. And in this time, he was actually charging 6p for his lectures. So it's actually unclear whether his ideas were popular because they were convincing or because they were laughable, but it was likely some of both. But it obviously got to a point that his ideas were suddenly becoming profitable, which meant that his passion was getting closer to becoming kind of like a sustainable enterprise with his success.
That is actually so funny. Like, it's giving, what's that scene from Mean Girls where it's like, I can't go out, I'm sick.
I'm literally
just not turning up to the lecture. That is funny. So did he get quite a big fan base then? A big following, I should say.
Yeah, he did, because he ended up becoming just so convincing in his teachings. And I feel like we see that a lot with even today's society with conspiracy theorists. They just are so convincing, and that is how that they get a massive following.
I said this before, but when I went to see David Icke, and he's like, he's doolally, and like, you will fully leave that room convinced that Barack Obama is a lizard. Like, you will fully believe it for like an hour, and then you come back to reality. But yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
And in fact, in 1870, flat earther and Rowbotham's follower, a guy called John Hampton, offered £500 to anyone who could prove that the earth was curved. And so this famed scientist, Alfred Russel Wallace, he stepped up, and he's actually super famous today because he's actually considered the father of both biogeography and also the theory of evolution through natural selection. He kind of came up with this idea and directly inspired Darwin himself. So this guy, he took it upon himself to take up this offer, thinking it would be easy money. And £500 in the 1800s is a lot of money. So the way that he did this was he measured and placed 4 items at the same height above water in a straight line, equidistant from each other, and they were spread out along a 6-mile stretch. So he's kind of trying to mimic what Rowbotham showed before, but slightly differently, right? And his theory was that if you looked through a telescope, the center object would appear higher than the rest. So like, it would follow the curvature of the earth. So the ones closest would appear slightly lower, and the ones furthest away would appear slightly lower, and the one in the middle would be slightly higher than all of them because it would follow the curvature of the earth. If they all appeared at the same height, then he would have failed to prove this. And the event itself was over in a blink of an eye, literally as quick as it took to look through the telescope, because anyone who did look through the telescope said that the centermost object did actually appear to be the highest. And despite Hampton's best efforts, Wallace decided to offer an explanation for why Rowbotham's experiments were not properly executed. So while his initial measurements were mathematically sound, so his decision to do 6-mile distance was enough to show the curvature, it absolutely was, his conclusions were flawed because he failed to account for atmospheric refraction, and that is how light bends as it passes through air layers of varying densities. So this well-documented phenomenon can cause distant objects to remain visible even when they should be obscured by the curvature of the earth. And it's actually a really common phenomenon. So when you're looking at a sunset, for example, the sun might still appear to be hovering in the sky just above the horizon, but it has actually already fallen below the horizon because of the way that the air and the water distorts the sun.
But I'm a bit confused because like, this was in the 1800s, right? So like, if it was proved to be false back then like, how do people still believe that this is, like, why is this theory still alive?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question, and I think it's one that I don't think I'll fully be able to answer, other than like, people just were really convincing with how they told a story, and some people had free will and decided to believe that. But it was basically continued by dedicated believers of the theory despite the evidence, which obviously is just a bit crazy. But we know nowadays that there are people, you can hand them all the evidence in the world and they'll still believe what they want to believe.
Yeah.
And in 1956, an Englishman named Samuel Shenton founded the International Flat Earth Society, and he was heavily influenced by Samuel Rowbotham's ideas and experiments, but took a slightly different approach. And rather than sort of leaning on religious texts, he presented himself as a man of science, and he even managed to become an inductive member of the Royal Astronomical and Royal Geographical Societies, just like some of the flat earthers before him. And he was eager to spread his beliefs and took every opportunity to speak on the subject. But just 2 years after founding his society in 1958, something happened that he probably didn't love. NASA was established, and soon after, satellite images showing the curvature of the Earth started making headlines worldwide. And instead of reconsidering his stance, Shenton dismissed these images and claimed that they were just optical illusions created by wide angle lenses. I guess kind of like 0.5 that we know today, or like GoPro or like fisheye lenses. And it was likely around this time that the flat earth model shifted from a square to a disc. So originally people thought that the earth was a square and decided to kind of evolve into them thinking it was a flat disc. And another idea in this time also emerged, and that was that Antarctica wasn't a continent at the bottom of the globe, but it was actually a massive ice wall encircling the entire flat Earth, which is a really convenient explanation for why the oceans just don't spill over the edges and you just don't fall off the edge of the Earth. And then came their flat earthers' biggest challenge yet, and that was astronauts returning home with photographs of the Earth as a sphere. But Shenton still wasn't convinced, right? He argued that all the images were fake, and we kind of touched on this in the first episode of this series where we spoke about moon landing and how obviously the images could be doctored. And in doing so, he planted the seed for one of today's most well-known flat earth claims, and that is that NASA is actively covering up the true shape of the Earth. And he wasn't alone. His theory aligned with another emerging conspiracy that NASA faked the moon landing, like I said, and he believed that the agency was actually running a massive scam, faking space research to launder tax money for top secret projects. What projects exactly, he never specified because obviously they were top secret. But despite facing a lot of backlash, Shenton managed to grow the International Flat Earth Research Society, proving that the Flat Earth movement wasn't going away anytime soon.
That's really interesting. I feel like the whole controversy around the moon landing like definitely amplified this theory, right? Like they probably in a way helped each other grow because a lot of people assumed that one supported the other. So that's really interesting. So I can kind of see like how those theories grew. But can we go back to Antarctica? Because the next time my uncle brings this up at Christmas dinner, like I want to be able to argue it fully with like science. And so can we talk about, for starters, how did that theory even come about? Like how did everyone just decide, okay, there's mile-high walls around Antarctica? Like surely someone didn't just say it and then everyone's like, yeah, fairs, you're right.
Yeah, exactly. And like you said, obviously there was a lot of doubt around this time about the moon landing, and literally around a similar time in 1958 the Antarctic Treaty was signed, and that designated Antarctica as a place for peaceful but scientific research. But to flat earthers, this wasn't just about international cooperation, it was suspicious. Why would so many countries suddenly agree to protect a frozen, uninhabited continent? For them, the answer was clear, and the treaty was actually part of a massive cover-up. And what was being hidden? It was the giant ice wall that supposedly surrounds the edge of the Earth. And I can't actually say this without like having a smirk on my face, because to me it's just so crazy. But from their perspective, there was no other reason why world leaders would be so invested in keeping Antarctica off limits unless it was literally holding our planet together.
And it's like, well, what was next to Antarctica? Is there some like blank space between the countries and then these mile-high walls? Because, you know, you can't have like Antarctica next to the Caribbean. because it would just fucking melt the ice.
Yeah,
So,
that's what I
like,
want to know. Like, I think there is
yeah,
like a
like,
well-documented map of what flat Earth looks like, but yeah, I
oh
don't know.
my
It
God.
doesn't make sense
We
to
got to look at
me.
that. I'm going to look at that at some point. But all of this was pre-internet, right?
Yeah.
So I imagine this is very similar with a lot of conspiracy theories, but did the invention of the internet change anything? Like more, I don't know, like exchange of information, I guess.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you say that. And I think it's like quite nice that it comes from you because, you know, you're into sort of the age of the internet and how that impacts us. But that's absolutely correct. Like, this was all pre-internet, and I think it's harder to kind of formulate a belief and get it out there pre-internet. Now we have the internet, misinformation is just flying all over the shop, and like there's no real kind of control of it, to be honest.
Yeah.
But there was a guy named Daniel Shenton, and he actually had no relation to Samuel Shenton, and he created an online forum where flat earthers could discuss their beliefs without ridicule. And this anonymous space gave the movement a lot more room to grow, and soon new ideas and theories started filling in the gaps of the flat earth logic. And by 2009, the Flat Earth Society had launched an official website, complete with membership opportunities and its own wiki. But with so many people contributing, not everyone always agreed on the details. And in fact, the only thing all modern flat earthers agree on is that the earth is flat, and essentially everything else is up for debate. And in the same sort of space, the rise of YouTube also helped spread the movement even further. So you have creators like Mark Sargent, and he gained niche internet fame for various videos on flat earth theory, and his series like Flat Earth Clues racked up hundreds of thousands of views. And in 2008 he was even featured on a documentary called Behind the Curve, which explored the flat earth community and its growing popularity. And Sargent's particular version of the theory takes things even further. He actually believes that the earth isn't just flat, it is completely enclosed. So according to him, NASA has never been to space because space travel isn't even possible. Instead, he argues that the sky itself, often referred to as the firmament, is a physical barrier, a kind of simulation, if you will, like a giant planetarian dome that controls daytime and nighttime and the stars. And the reason I'm saying a simulation is because we touched on the simulation last week. So if you want to learn all about the simulation theory and whether that's plausible, I can tell you now, spoiler, it's a lot more plausible than this conspiracy theory.
Yes.
But
yeah.
So who is behind this illusion or simulation? Well, Sargent actually believes it could be NASA or possibly some higher being, and he even compares it to The Truman Show, which is a great movie that stars Jim Carrey's character, who unknowingly lives his entire life inside a massive fake world built to deceive him, and it's like basically a TV show for everybody else. And for flat earthers like Sargent, this isn't just a conspiracy, it's a completely different way of seeing reality. And thanks to the internet, the perspective is just reaching more people than it ever did before.
Who knew the flat earth theory had some overlap with simulation theory? Because really it does. But this is kind of giving like an immature version of simulation theory. Like it's giving Springfield, The Simpsons, that film. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I think we spoke about that on the Origins of Space episode.
Yeah.
Where like they used to think it was the model was like a geocentric model where everything orbited the Earth and that everything was in domes. Crazy.
It's actually crazy.
So now I guess we know where the flat Earth theory comes from and also like how it gained popularity. And I would say that the theory is fairly baseless. But there's not really much science here, is there? It's literally just, okay, there's some walls and like we're all being kept into this thing, but we're not even clever enough to really tap into simulation theory. We're just, there's just walls. So I guess like, let's go into the science. So when did we actually start to believe that the Earth is round, and what evidence did we find to support that? Because the best way sometimes to disprove a conspiracy theory is to prove the other side of the conspiracy theory, right? So if they have no science, the other side did, yeah?
Yeah, 100%. And I think throughout this series, we can quite easily say that some of the conspiracy theories are probably easily debunked with science. But as we've discovered so far on the series, that not all conspiracy theories can be debunked, because actually the science kind of supports the theory. But in this case, the science does not support the theory. And the idea that the Earth is a sphere likely dates back to Pythagoras around 500 BC. BC again. Can't do with these dates. But now no one really knows how or why we came up with that conclusion. But historians think it had a lot to do with Pythagoras' belief that a sphere was the perfect shape. And since Pythagoras also thought that the Earth was the center of the universe, a spherical Earth just made sense to him. So that's not exactly the most scientific reasoning, but his ideas then paved way for Plato to continue to explore them, and he developed those a bit further. And then came Aristotle, our favourite guy.
For God's sake.
Actually...
Not Aristotle. Why has he made it into season 5? I thought we left him in season 4.
I know, he literally has a theory for everything.
He has a way, yeah.
Imagine if he made up conspiracy theories. I think we'd still believe them to this day, to be honest.
Probably. He'd probably be right. He's always right.
He's always right. But he actually brought the evidence to the table. So when he looked up at the night sky, he noticed that as he travelled north or south, the stars and constellations seemed to shift position, and the only explanation was that the Earth had to be round. He also pointed out that the Earth's shadow on the moon was curved during lunar eclipses, and that objects naturally moved towards the Earth's centre, something Isaac Newton would later call gravity. And then fast forward to around 200 BC, we meet Eratosthenes, a philosopher, mathematician and astronomer who decided to put the Earth's shape to the test. So he had heard that in the city of Syene, which is modern-day Aswan, Egypt, shadows completely disappeared at noon on the summer solstice. And that got him thinking, would the same thing happen in his hometown of Alexandria? So he ran a simple experiment. So he stuck a pole into the ground, waited until noon, but unlike in Syene, the pole will still cast a shadow, about 7 degrees. And based on the assumption that the sun's rays hit the Earth at the same angle, he figured that the only way to explain the difference was that the Earth's surface must be curved. But he didn't stop there. So using the distance between Syene and Alexandria, which is roughly 700 miles, he was able to calculate the Earth's circumference. And he actually came shockingly close to the actual number, and his estimate was only about 30 kilometers off from modern day satellite measurements, which I think is crazy. How are you doing that kind of science 200 BC? It's incredible. Crazy to me. And after Eratosthenes, other Greek scholars like Strabo and Ptolemy made similar observations. Sailors noticed that as a ship approached land, mountains seemed to rise from the horizon, rather just appearing all at once. And their conclusion was the Earth had to be curved. And in fact, Strabo even suggested that humans had probably figured this out as soon as they started sailing. And it was through sailing that humans were able to also circumnavigate the globe again, proving that it is round. So it all came about when we started traveling through sailing, that we really were providing evidence for the Earth being a globe.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, if it dates back to 200 BC, that's something that as humans we've known for so long. And I think that just kind of feeds into the idea that a lot of conspiracy theories are they just want a conspiracy theory. Do you know what I mean? Just for the sake of it, which fair enough, I can't argue with that, but also maybe pick a conspiracy theory where you actually have some substance. But yeah, so that was historic evidence, I guess, for flat Earth, right? But yeah, I don't know, is there anything more up to date, with, I don't know, technological advancements, even things you mentioned like space travel, surely we have now even more solid evidence that the Earth is in fact round.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's going to be a lot of physics-based research is on the assumption that the Earth is round. Even sort of aviation, gravity itself is all on the assumption that the Earth is round. So to put it bluntly, many things point towards the Earth being round, but just to maybe list a few of the more simpler ones. Firstly, we have photographic photographic and video evidence from space, and the most famous picture probably being the blue marble taken in 1972 from the Apollo 17 spacecraft. And this was a picture that majorly debunked the flat Earth theory. And since then, all picture and video evidence have consistently shown the Earth as a sphere. The next evidence is the curvature of the Earth itself. So we can see this at high altitudes and through disappearing ships over the horizon and being able to see other planetary shapes as round as well. Why would other planets be round but not Earth? And not only that, we still have lunar and solar eclipses today. Like, this was something that was visualized in 200 or 500 BC, but we can still see those today, and still the Earth casts a shadow or round shadow on the moon. So basically it's like consistent observations from like 200 BC to now. More evidence is the Coriolis effect, which basically explains the weather patterns we experience on Earth. So the Coriolis effect is basically the deflection of air caused by the Earth's rotation, and it basically defines where hurricanes can and can't form. So if the Coriolis effect wasn't a thing, hurricanes wouldn't necessarily exist, and they also wouldn't necessarily have defined paths. So in the UK, you can't get hurricanes due to sort of like the curvature of the Earth. It doesn't allow for hurricanes to
Never really thought about that.
extend up. Yeah, it's like the angle. So yeah, that's why we don't experience hurricanes. And then finally, GPS and satellites. GPS relies on a network of satellites orbiting the Earth in a consistent pattern, and that's only possible due to the Earth's round shape. If the Earth were flat, satellites would not be able to maintain their position relative to the Earth's surface. So flat earthers' very access to the internet to spread flat Earth misinformation is based on the very fact that the Earth is round. So I'll leave it as that at that.
That's a mic drop moment. That's like, you're so dumb. Bye. I'm sorry. Look, listen.
Savage.
We all know, like, I do love a conspiracy theory. We know that I love a conspiracy theory, and I'm someone who's very, very willing to entertain conspiracy theories, because I actually believe that in most conspiracy theorists there is some truth, or there's something to be learned from them. But for the flat Earth, like, I'm sorry. You're dumb. Sorry.
And I think like it's crazy that it was all kind of based on a honest experiment, but the wrong conclusions were made because not enough was known. I mean, in his mind, in Rowbotham's mind, he didn't know enough to be able to come to the right conclusions.
Yeah.
And I think like it just spiraled out of control from there, really, because it wasn't flat Earth theory hasn't been documented as being a thing before that point, because we have such historical evidence of the Earth being round.
Yes, in fact, like, the historic evidence points towards them doing what they can to prove that it is round. Like, that's so.
And I tried to find more scientific evidence for the Earth being flat. I'm sorry, I just couldn't find it. It was very hard to research.
Well, this is what I'm saying. This is the one conspiracy theory where it's like there is literally like any evidence, quote unquote evidence, they have for this theory is like so ridiculous that you just think you're just doing for this for the sake of it. Like, because again, going back to the mile-high walls around Antarctica, who put the ice walls there? Because we don't have like mile-high ice walls form naturally, so who put them there? You're saying it's NASA, but like it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I feel like the flat Earth theory is the whole theory of it is built on like a string of conspiracy theories. So like the moon landing was fake, simulation theory, top secret research in Antarctica, like these are all other conspiracy theories, and I think they all just feed into this flat Earth theory, but like there's actually no evidence for it. It's just more conspiracy theories.
I think basically you're right, and like flat earthers literally are not clever enough to understand the other conspiracy theories that actually hold some scientific evidence. So they just took bits from all of them, combined them to make this theory that makes absolutely no sense whatsoever.
And it's deep rooted in religion as well. Like, obviously, it's written in the Bible that the Earth has four corners, things like that. So,
I mean, yeah, and when you said about like the heavens being above, I was like, yeah, fair enough. Like I can understand that because yeah, if you believe heaven is above, then the earth has to be flat.
Yeah.
But I don't know, I always think it must be quite difficult as someone who's very religious and also really, really loves science. Like, I mean, I can't speak from experience because I don't believe in religion, but if you do, like, I don't know.
I honestly had people in my class at school who just refused to believe in evolution because they believed that God created humans and that was how they came about. And the teacher was like, look, it's going to be in your exam. Like, you don't have to believe it. You just have to be able to regurgitate it for a test. And then at that point,
yeah, but then
like,
also
okay.
you could just argue that like God created evolution.
Yeah, I think it did end up in being like a big debate in class. But some people obviously read the Bible literally rather than.
Well, I think that's the thing. Is a lot of like and a lot of religious texts are open to interpretation.
Yeah,
and that's not me saying that like your belief of like if you're listening and you are religious, that's not me saying that like your belief is like incorrect or like people interpret it wrong. I'm just saying that people interpret it differently. Yeah. Okay, so the conclusion is, well, my conclusions are I do not, after this episode, I do not believe that the earth is flat. Not that I ever did, and I actually didn't expect to by the end of this episode. And I think it's safe to say that you feel the same way.
Yeah, I really was hoping that I could come to this episode and bring all this evidence for like potential flat earth, but unfortunately I just don't have it.
There's none.
And I think actually it's been one of the first episodes where we're literally like, we just cannot provide the scientific basis for this conspiracy theory. All the ones before it, there's been pros and cons. Both.
Well, I love this because I feel like it shows that we are presenting both sides of the argument where possible, which is important in a series like this. So I love this. And just a reminder for our listeners that every single week after the episode goes live, we are putting a poll on our Instagram story to see what you guys think of the conspiracy theory after listening to the episode. So you have a week to listen to this episode and then let us know your thoughts over on our Instagram poll. Our Instagram is at soculturedpodcast. So yeah, you'll definitely have to come and let us know. And thank you so much, Taz, for this really interesting episode. And for now, it's time to get to one of our listener stories. So let's see what is in our inbox today. Okay, the subject line of today's email is "My supervisor plays God." So, here's the scoop. I'm in the third year of my undergraduate program working in a chemistry lab that's supposed to be one of the best on campus. At first, I was thrilled. Who wouldn't want to work in a group known for groundbreaking research? But I soon found out that real lab work isn't about research or contributions. It's about being part of, in quotes, the club. Let me explain. There's this inner circle in my lab, basically a small group of chosen ones who also have a special relationship with the lab supervisor. They get first dibs on projects, have early access to new equipment, and are practically guaranteed publication credits whether or not they do the work. And they're all really close with the supervisor. They laugh at all of his jokes, go for drinks together, and have this weird in the know vibe. It's like watching the world's cringiest clique. That's savage. Meanwhile, people like me are basically left with the grunt work. I can barely get time on the lab equipment because it's reserved by the chosen ones who aren't even there half the time. Whenever I bring it up, they shrug it off with, you know how it is.
My God, savage.
At first, I tried to be part of the crowd, but it turns out my independent spirit didn't make the cut. I wasn't interested in kissing up or pretending to be fascinated by my supervisor's weekly monologues after his fishing trips. I'm just here to learn and maybe make a few discoveries along the way. Now I get left out of the group meetings that actually matter, including one-on-one training sessions with the supervisor. I only find out the important stuff through third-hand rumours. It's hurting my progress, my grades, and probably my future. So here I am doing all the work and getting none of the perks. It's like the ultimate lab hazing ritual, and I failed. This is giving my lab is a cult. Like, it's so reminiscent of that whole story.
Literally, like, really similar. But this one sounds like even more extreme, to be honest.
Yeah, literally, it does. Like, she's not even allowed on the equipment because other people have booked it out and they're not even there half the time.
Yeah, and
Well,
automatic like authorship on publications if you're in the club. That's not how science should be done. It really annoys me when PIs do that. When they're like, oh, you know, I'm just going to put this person on because it will like widen the reach, or I'm going to put this one on because it's good for collaboration, or, you know, it's just like, I don't even know who this person is. Like, no,
Now,
they're
literally,
not
that happened to me
claiming
recently.
this.
I submitted a paper and I got this huge author list, like, put this on. I was like, I don't know who these people are. I've never met these people in my life. I've done all the work for this paper. And quite honestly, I'd rather that be reflected rather than widen the reach.
Yeah,
Like,
100%.
it's just, and like, there was one part in the submission process where I had to be like, write what contributions everyone made, and I straight up just emailed my supervisor and I was like, can you please clarify what contribution these people have made, because I genuinely don't know, so
yeah,
you best tell me.
You shouldn't be writing that, because if you don't know what they contributed, then if you write out fake contributions, then you're implicated in it. Like,
exactly.
I think that's just so weird.
Literally,
I think it is such a I think it's so common in academia, I'm not gonna lie.
Really, really common.
But I'm just like, why?
I haven't really heard of it like going on in like the lab, and your PI is giving toxic because he's obviously manifested this whole scenario, or like this whole dynamic where everybody's like in competition with each other. Like, he's obviously just a very power hungry person, because he can definitely see that people are in competition with each other, and it almost sounds like he's like pitting people off against each other, especially since you said that he's like now excluded you from group meetings, and also what you're not allowed like one-on-one training, whereas other people are. Like, what the hell? If I was like this listener and I was early on in this PhD, like, I would just get the hell out of there, because it's not worth it. Like, that is literally not worth it. You're going to be just not in a happy, healthy environment for like the next 3 years of your life. But what if you're like halfway through your PhD? Like, what do you do at that point?
The thing is that with PhD you can tangent quite a lot, so you could tangent out of that specific lab, and make collaborations in a different chemistry lab. But it is hard. That is really tough.
I mean, we spoke about this before, but like sometimes you're just like forced to play the game even when you don't want to, and like that's really sad. But sometimes it literally is a case of like, get out or just play along with it. I think you just have to assess like how much help do you need from your supervisor. Like, are you gonna be able to get through it without one-to-one training sessions with your supervisor? Probably. Are you gonna be able to get through your PhD without group meetings? Yeah, probably.
It's just going to be harder, you know. I feel like a PhD can be very individual. Like, my PhD was I was just a lone soldier, or like a lone wolf in my PhD, pretty much. I had like one friend, then we worked together, but like, other than that, there was literally no one else in our lab who was doing any kind of research. So we were just literally trying to do everything on our own. And now that I've gone to a different institution and I see the help that PhD students get, I'm literally like, wow, I was neglected in my PhD.
Yeah. See, like, it was the opposite for me, because like in my PhD I got so much help. Not like necessarily like one-to-one help, but like there was a community aspect like in my lab. Like, everybody helped each other, and like we would have weekly group meetings, and at the time I thought they were just a bit of a waste of time, and I was like, they're just a bit of effort. But now that I don't have them, I'm like, wow, I really miss having those lab meetings. Whereas now, like, I'm the only postdoc in my supervisor's lab. Like, there's no other postdocs, there's no PhD students, there's no master students, nothing. It's literally just me. So now, like, I really miss that. But I mean, yeah, you can definitely go without them. So maybe just keep your independent spirit and just keep doing what you're doing. I don't know, it's difficult, but like, maybe you just don't need to. It sucks, but you don't need the lab meetings. You don't need the one-to-ones. The only awkward thing I think is the equipment sitch.
Yeah, but I think you can get around that, right? If you see them, they've booked the equipment and then they're not using it, just jump on. You kind of have to just be a bit ruthless, I think. Like, and people book equipment and then not end up using it, and like, that is so frustrating.
Yeah, that is really annoying. I just don't have to worry about any of that stuff, to be fair.
Okay, Liv, but like, seriously, if you were in our listener's situation, what would you do?
I'd probably just go along how she's been going along, being annoyed about it but getting on with it, because like she said, she doesn't want to kiss up, she doesn't want to suck up, she doesn't want to get involved in the cult. So but also if leaving isn't an option and like you want to complete this PhD, then you just got to suck it up. Like I said, I think you can get away with, it definitely makes it harder, but you can get away without those group meetings, and you can get away without the one-to-ones. You can definitely get away with not going to the pub with them. So it sucks, but just get on with it and just know that it isn't forever. Like PhD is temporary, and like it's only like what 3 to 4 years, and then you're going to get out of there, and then you're going to find a job. And if you go into a job that you don't like, you just get another job. So it sucks, but it's temporary. And I feel like there's so many other things that can make the PhD a really good experience. Like look for other people outside of your lab who are doing a PhD who can help you. There's like PhD support groups, even like on like the online community. Like that's how me and Taz met, is through the online PhD community, because we both like, you know, came online and spoke about our PhD experience and stuff. And like you find people who can relate to situations like this. So you never know what kind of friends you'll make through doing something like that, and like where it'll lead, you know. Like if me and Taz had never done that, we would not be doing this podcast. So
Yeah,
it's a really valuable.
We had a like gossip that was so similar to this. Like my lab is a cult, so I guess like have some kind of comfort in knowing that you're not the only one who like goes through this. Like so many people go through this exact thing. And I think in that episode we said like either join the cult and try your best to get in there and get in this like elite group. If you're not convinced in doing that, then you can get through a PhD on your own. Like there's a lot of people that have done it, and yeah, like Liv said, once you have completed your PhD, then you can choose a job that's like more tailored to you, and you can be like way more selective. So yeah, I think PhDs can be really tough for some people and actually not too bad for others. It's just like really annoying that there isn't like a
luck of the
gold
draw
standard.
Yeah, it literally is a lottery. I'm not gonna lie. Like sometimes you think you're going into a great lab, and then you get there and you're like, like I've done that before. I think I'm going into the best lab ever, and I'm like so excited for it. And then I start working there, and I'm like, oh, this is nothing like I expected. And then other times I'm like, not sure if this is going to be great, but then I end up absolutely loving it. So it is just such a luck of the draw. And like as much as you can ask questions beforehand, like sometimes when you start working there, it is just a completely different experience. But yeah, we definitely have had many stories like this, and this won't be the last one that we get. So like Taz says, you are not alone. I don't know if that brings you any comfort.
Yeah, and if you are like only like 6 months in, obviously you can dip, but also just know that like it takes time to establish these relationships in the lab. And it's like, it might seem a bit culty at first, because honestly it is. Like when I went to a new lab, I felt very like left out. But now that I've been working there for a year, I'm very much inducted into the lab. So it's like, it seemed culty at first and that I was outside of it, but now I've been integrated in. So these things take time as well.
That's such a good point. And I feel like that's like any job, any kind of like new hobby you start. Like, for example, I remember when I first started pole, I was like, I'm not like any of these people. These people are all like cliquey and they're all really good friends. And then like after a few months, I was like, I was one of them. Do you know what I mean? Like sometimes it just takes a long time, especially if you're someone like me who's quite introverted and you don't necessarily like put yourself out there and like insert yourself in them situations. Sometimes if you're the type of person who like waits to be invited, like it can take a little bit longer, and that can feel really isolating at first. But maybe it's that they're not even necessarily doing it on purpose. But I think we've all actually been on the other side where we have been like in the clique, and in hindsight we think to ourselves, oh, maybe we should have included that person more, or maybe we could have made more of an effort with that person. So maybe it's not even intentional. And I think that's a good point to consider, because it might just be that if you put yourself out there a little bit more, if you have the confidence to do so, then things might feel a little bit different.
Well, I hope that helped you, if you're listening, maybe navigate through that emotion, because yeah, it is a lot to deal with, like starting a PhD or like dealing with these emotions or like cliquey labs. But thank you so much for writing in. I hope we did help you. So if you are listening and you have a similar conundrum and you want our advice, then we'll always leave the link for Laboratory in the description. And as we always say, it's always anonymous. But yeah, thanks to our listener for writing in. And next week, Liv, do you want to touch on what we will be talking about?
Yeah, so next week we are going to be diving into the topic of whether or not time travel is real and whether or not time travel is possible. So stay tuned for that episode. But for now, we will see you guys next week. So thanks for joining us. Bye, everyone.
Bye.